Winter has finally come in its full glory, so I'm continuing my workshop improvements. First, I need to have a decent workbench to spend less time working on a garage floor. I drew a simple plan with SketchUp. I am not an expert with the software, but creating basic rectangular objects like this is quite simple. This workbench needs 33 pieces in total, 17 boards for the bench top, 4 long rails, 4 legs, each of which will be laminated of 2 boards, so 8 boards in total, and 4 short rails. I like writing down the cut list on a piece of paper, so I have it handy. First, I took a 2x6 and cut its end to make it straight and square. The bench top will be 1.8 meters long, so I'm giving 5 centimeters extra and cut this 2x6 into 1.85 meter long boards. For this particular 2x6, I cut one piece from one end and one piece from another end, as it had a very long crack in the middle. I jointed one face and one edge of each board and had 10 2x6s ready to be ripped in half. The actual dimensions of these 2x6s are a bit less than 150 by 50 mm, so by ripping them in two pieces of 70 mm wide, I should just about get two equal pieces from a single 2x6 board. You lose some material by jointing the boards, also by ripping them due to curve of the blade. As my thickness planer is currently undergoing its warranty service, I had to use my table saw to get the same thickness for all boards. Ripping boards with a table saw would not be a messy job by itself, but when you're cutting just a few millimeters off the edge, all the sawdust are thrown to your face. Cutting pine makes its resin stick to the blade like crazy, but white spirit cleans it off well. The boards are 70 mm wide, and this little table saw can cut up to 75 mm. It did well with the task. By the way, don't underestimate the amount of wood chips and sawdust this milling process creates. When all the boards for the bench top were prepared, it was time for the glue up. I decided to do this process in two parts by gluing just one half of the bench top at a time. I aligned all the boards, drew a triangle with a pencil so I knew how to put them back once the glue is applied. Then I rotated all the boards but the last one 90 degrees and applied a good amount of glue. Maybe a bit too much, but the surface area was big and it would have taken me ages to apply the precisely exact amount of glue. Then I flipped the boards back so the pencil triangle is visible and aligned, and started clamping everything. First I clamped each end of the slab so all boards are at the same level, and then I clamped all the pipe clamps until I saw a good glue squeeze out. Perfect. Almost. The next day I took a paint scraper and got rid of all the hardened glue. The slab was not perfectly flat, but not too bad either. Then I milled and cut to length the boards for laminating the table legs. As you have probably noticed, I don't have a miter saw, but I really like the small cordless saw. When you're working with long boards, it is easier to cut the board in place than to carry it to a miter saw. I laminated two legs only, because I ran out of clamps, as it often happens to many woodworkers. I also flattened one half of the bench top on the jointer. Not a perfect finish, but it will do. After flattening the second half, I put them together to see how they line up. As you can see, there is a slight bow across the width, and also a gap where both halves should be joined. To overcome this issue, I ripped those edges with a table saw. Then I marked the lines to drill the holes for the dowels. Made sure they're not too tight. I dry fitted both pieces prior to gluing them together to check if they fit, which they did, then applied a decent amount of glue on the edge and on the dowels, and clamped the bench top into a single slab. The glue squeeze out was nice across the full length. So all 4 legs were glued, bench top became a single unit as well. Now I needed to trim the ends. The rip capacity of the circular saw was a few millimeters too short, so I turned the slab over and completed the cut from the other side. Next, I had to trim the legs to their final length. I switched the blade from a general purpose one to a crosscut blade with more teeth. First, I cut off the ends of all 4 legs just to make sure they're flat and square. Then I measured the final lengths and cut them to the length. I put the legs in their positions. My plan changed from the initial one a bit. I put the front legs in line with the bench top, but the rear legs about 50 millimeters away from the edge to accommodate for the protruding foundation so the table can be put against the wall with no gap. As for fitting the legs, I drilled 2 holes for the dowels, then put these dowel pins to mark the holes on the bottom of the bench top. I drilled the holes there as well and dry fitted the leg. Fitment was good, so I continued with gluing the legs to the bench top. After clamping the leg, I realized that it was not square with the bench top. So I came up with the straightening method. I put this thin board on the ends of the pipe clamps, adjusted for squareness, and put a screw through the board into the end of the pipe. This worked great. Then I cut the top railings and dry fitted them. I did not glue them to the bench top or legs, but rather used these long screws. Then I marked 4 spots for the screws, pre-drilled them and screwed the railing to the bench top. I did the same with other railings as well. I milled the rest 2 long and 2 short railings. I needed to attach the top railings to the legs. As I was using a big-headed screws, I drilled a wide hole with a spade bit for the screw head and then a hole for the screw with a brad drill bit. For the bottom railings, I used 2 screws for each end, 1 long screw and 1 shorter screw. Those long screws are really huge, so 2 of them would have been an overkill. Then I put the workbench on its legs and started routing all the sharp edges with a chamfer bit. This is especially important for the bottom of the legs, so they don't split when you drag a workbench across the floor. Now it was time for sanding. I used this 80 grit sandpaper. If this would be a fine piece of furniture, I would be probably sanding it up to 220 grit. But for a workbench it is fine, and I will put varnish on it, so all sanding imperfections will be filled. This pine lumber is eating the sandpaper for breakfast. The sanding was completed, the table was looking good, it was time for applying the varnish. First I painted the underside, then I flipped the workbench and varnished the top. And here is the outcome, a sturdy workbench from a construction-grade lumber. Three days of work and 3 bags of sawdust later, I will finally have my first workshop piece of furniture. As always, thank you for watching.